All right. Okay, welcome everyone. So just to start today, we're going to try and finish off this Maths 24 question, and the person who gets it right gets a shout out from me. And so I'm going to ask you to hit me with suggestions. Who has a suggestion? Like, what if we go 7 times 5, which is 35, minus 4, which is 31, minus 8, that gets me to 23. So that's pretty close. Can you get to 24 using these 4 numbers and just the normal operations? Who has a suggestion? Who can get closer than me? I'll give you a minute or two just to get your brains moving. Remember that students, so one of the things about online learning is it's really important that as we get going today, you find yourself a spot that you can sit with a pen in your hand and you're actively participating. So if you're not active in this lesson, if you're not doing something, you don't retain very much. Whereas if you are typing in the chat, writing in your book, participating and interacting with us, we know that our brain likes that and helps us sort of retain things better. So I really want to see us give it a go on this first question. This is like our stretching exercise. And at the moment, I've lost the chat stream for a second. Maybe I'll find it again. Where did it go? And you know, any answers coming through there? 5 times 7?
Yeah, from Ria Batesway.
Is 35. That's not quite 24. Do we have any other suggestions? 7 minus 5 is 2. 8 minus 2 is 6. 6 times 2. Yes, I think you're on, Chulu. I think you've got it.
Well
7
done,
minus 5 is 2. So those ones gone. 8 minus 2 is 6, which is that one gone. And 6 times 4 is 24. I declare Chulu the champion. I think you plus again in order to get 24. Let's just see, if it's, so you're saying 7 plus 5. Oh, you're also right. 7 plus 5 plus 8 plus 4. This is 12. That's 20. That's 24. So we actually have 2 ways of getting there. Okay, well done, everyone. That was really nice to see. And I hope that your bodies are like, ready to rock and roll now, and we can start our lesson. So I just want to quickly do the admin section. There's no huge announcements today other than on Wednesday, we will have a formative quiz. And so there's none of that today, but on Wednesday that'll happen. And then the other thing to remember is if you're on the free trial, in your second week of the free trial, you will get a message from Watobe, or your parents or guardians will. And it's important that if you've enjoyed the experience, if you feel like you're learning and this is helping you, that you tell them. Otherwise, they won't really know what that message is about. And in order to continue with us after those 2 weeks, you do need to make payments. And so that is important that you tell your parents how you feel about your learning at Watobe. Okay, so just bear that in mind. Yep, Anya?
I jump in here as well, if you don't
Please,
mind. Just on that note, because obviously all you guys are all around the country and you're at different schools. If you feel that Watobe's been working for you and that you really like it, please recommend it to your friends, right? Ask your friends, dude, listen to this awesome site. It's called Watobe. Sign up. It helps us with maths. Just get the word out there. Really, it'll be such a help, not just for you, but for us as well. All right, back to you, sir.
Cool. Yeah, no, I think, look, I know for a fact that a lot of students need help with their maths. And I think it is awesome because of this mechanism that we're using with the internet. It is a lot more adaptable to handling more students. And so, if you have a friend who just kind of, needs a bit of help, don't be afraid to recommend Watobe to them, because the first 2 weeks are free no matter what. So you can get a good sense of what's going on before you decide to move forward. Okay, enough about that. Let's get going with a recap of the main ideas. So really, the main ideas recently have been about these numbers called the integers. And they have a funky symbol like this. And what we've been practicing is, how do we add and subtract integers? And what we had things like integers. When we look at them and imagine them, we imagine them on the number line. And if we go to the left, we get the negative integers. And if we go to the right, we get the positive integers. So this is a new class of numbers that we have to master. And what we spoke about in the previous lessons is what happens when we have situations like one integer minus another, but those situations can look quite sneaky. So let's go with 3 plus 6, and then let's go with 3 minus 6. I want to do a little warm-up. Put the answers to A, B, C, and D in the chat now. I want to see, what do you remember? Because this is the type of stuff that we've been learning about, which is adding and subtracting different types of integers. And this is a nice, confusing little combination I cooked up for you right now. So put your answers in the chat for A, B, C, and D. And then we can see how much more talking I'll do about in the recap.
A lot of answers coming in for A.
Brilliant. We'll give it a little bit of time. So if you can, guys, line you up answers up like this, like A, B, C, D, or you lock them all in at the same time. And what I said in previous lessons was, I said, look, you always start with the first number. So you start with the first number and you ask yourself, where is that on the number line? So if that's 0, then -3 is going to be over here. And if I take away 6, do I go to the left or do I go to the right? And this is the idea that I was speaking about in previous lessons. I also spoke about what happens when you have two negatives next to each other. And I also spoke about, a couple of things actually, but let's wait a little bit of time and see what the students answer in the chat by themselves. Okay. Okay, I see lots of answers coming in. That's good. Keep them coming. So the first one for A, the answer is going to be -9. And the reason it's -9 is you start at -3 and then you move 6 units to the left. If you go 6 units in this direction, you're going to get all the way down to -9. Okay, so that is for A. For B, you actually have to first figure out what happens when you have a double negative. And when you have a double negative, you're going to get -3. A double negative is a positive, so you get -3 plus 6. And if you think about that on my number line, if I'm at -3, let me get rid of this thing here. If I'm at -3 and I go +6, I need to go 6 units in this direction. Now, after 3 jumps, I'm going to be at 0. I need to go 3 more, and then I'll get to the number 3. And so the answer for B is going to be 3. The answer for C is going to be 9. That's just good old 3 plus 6. And the answer for D is going to be -3. Okay, so that's the answer. And there's one more I want to do. So E, What happens if we have -3 minus +6? What do you get for that one? Pop it in the chat. How do we deal with minus a plus? We spoke about this in the last lesson. Now, a double negative, we said they cancel each other out. So I think the analogy I used in the previous one was double negatives cancel each other out, but for a negative and a positive, if someone gives you negative feedback and then someone gives you a bit of positive feedback, which one tends to stay in your head afterwards? I think that's a pretty good analogy, actually. Let's see what the answers. Okay. All right. So it looks like the answers are coming through. If you go -3 minus +6, if there's a negative and positive next to each other, what happens is that the negative actually stays around. And so -3 take away 6 is just going to be -3 on the number line. And then take away 6 means go 6 directions in this direction. And we get -9. Okay. Now, before we move on, actually, let's move on. I think that we need to practice that a little bit, but what we're going to do is we're going to do a speed round. Let me actually get rid of that. Sorry, guys, let's get rid of this. Thanks. And then, okay. So I want you to do the following questions from this one. I want you to do these 9 for me. So it goes from 4 to 12. I want you to put your answers in the chat after each round of 3. So once you've done these ones, you put the answers for 4, 5, and 6 in the chat. And then we're going to do 2 rounds of that afterwards. And if we are mostly getting that right, then I'm happy to move on to multiplication and division. Okay, so yes.
Sorry, I know you've highlighted the first 3 lines, but some of our learners are watching from phones. Is it possible for you to zoom in just on those and then remove the yellow line, maybe, if we're only focusing on those 9?
Yeah, all good.
Thank you so much.
We're basically doing, no, thank you, Anya. We're doing these 9, and all I want you to do is do them in batches of 3. So once you've done 3, you put the answer in the chat. And if you're able to do the first batch, then that's fine. And then you move on to the next batch and the next batch. And this is sort of a nice speed test here. Okay, I will give you 3 minutes. So you've got until 5:15 to finish this. While you do that, I'm going to get some water.
Just remember, guys, when you have a negative number and you're minusing again, you move left on your number line. Always ask yourself where you are at in your number line and which way you need to go.
Yeah, that's very important. And I suppose I should repeat this. A double negative cancels each other out. And so 4 will be the same as 9 plus 8. And then ask yourself, what is 9 plus 8? It's going to be 17. Now, this situation is not a double negative. This is something a bit different. And this is one all by itself. So I am making it a bit harder now. I'm mixing them up a little bit, but that's because it's our next lesson on this. So in this one, the plus minus 8 is the same as saying minus 8. So what does that allow us to get to? Okay, I see those answers coming in, guys, which is fantastic. Let's just make sure that we are. Anya, if you could just watch the chat for anybody who's having any questions. So, guys, if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed, just let me know. But I think for the most part, I'm seeing pretty good stuff coming through. Okay, now we have to slow down again for this one. Yeah, no, it's looking good, everyone. So Didi, let's have a look. Didi's doing 10, 11, 12 already. Okay, I'll get to that now, Didi, but that's great. Iman is also on 7, 8, 9. Iman, I agree with you so far. Yep. So 11 minus 11 is the same as 11 plus 11. No, yes, it is, which means it is 22. Okay. And then for 10, when I have a double negative, I have minus 21 plus 1. And this is sneaky because if you're on the number line at minus 21 and I add 1, I go in this direction, which means the answer is minus 20. I'm sure that's going to catch a couple of students here. Okay. For 11, we have 3 plus minus 7, so 3 minus 7, which is minus 4. And then the last one, minus 2 minus 7, is minus 9. Okay. All right, so students, I'm going to give you a chance to look at that. If you have questions and you're uncertain about something, please put it in the chat, because it does, from where I'm looking, most of you are pretty close to getting this right most of the time. There's a few small errors, but on the whole, it's pretty good. So I'm going to move on to a next round of questions. But what I encourage you to do is, while we are going to this next round of questions, so how did you get minus 10 for 7? Okay, let's go to 7. I didn't get minus 10. I got minus 9. So 10's answer. Okay, so you want me to look at number 7 and number 10. Will do. Guys, thank you so much for sending your questions in over the chat. Struggling, can you please explain number 5, please? Okay, so number 5, and then example 10. Okay, let's try and do this. So in 5, the key issue is what happens when you have a positive and a negative next to each other. And really the rule that you need to learn is that a positive and a negative next to each other, I said that think about if somebody gives you some positive criticism and some negative, or I suppose negative criticism. The negative stuff tends to hang around in your head more. And that's maybe a good way of remembering that if a positive and negative interact, the negative is what gets left behind. So that's how I've got minus 2, minus 8. And if you think of the number line, if you're at minus 2 and you take away 8, you have to go 8 in that direction, which gets me to minus 10. So that was number 5. Number 7, I start at 1 and I take away 10. It's the good old-fashioned number line. If I start at 1, here's 0. If I take away 10, I have to use up 1 to get to 0, and then I use up 9 more of these to get down to minus 9. And then the last one, number 10, let me actually just rub this out. I'll do it again one more time. So a double negative in logic and in general, if you not something, the effect is that it's just what it would be without it. So a double negative is a positive. So that's sort of a bit of learning we have to do. It's a convention. Once we get to that, we need to figure out a way of visualizing what is minus 21 plus 1. So what I do is I put it on the number line and I ask, is +1 going to the right or the left? It's going to the right. And what's 1 unit to the right of that? It's -20. That's how I get it. Okay. So I hope that was helpful for some students who wanted a bit of extra practice. Now, I'm almost ready to move on. I just feel like a little bit more practice would do us good. And so I'm going to select the following questions. I'm going to zoom in on them. And if you could just do this set for me, the same way as before, except that I want you to, let's just do this set, and then I'm going to move on to multiplication and division. But I feel like we just need a bit of extra practice today to make sure we've got adding and subtracting integers.
I think just to badge in here, I'm just reading the chat.
Please let me know what's going on in the chat. And any questions?
Yeah. And I'm trying to answer for myself, but I think if you are finding these questions difficult, I suggest that you have a piece of paper and you draw yourself a lekker number line that somewhere goes from like -20 till 20. And then when you do these, sit with your finger and say, right, for instance, for the first one, you're at -3. Put your finger then on -3. Now you have to also, okay, you minusing a -3, but you can't minus. That must changes to a plus. Ne? So now you're at -3 and you have to add 3. So you're going to move 3 units to the right. Now I'm not going to say what the answer is because I've kind of given away all the steps. But that is how your mind should think about us. Is first thing first, is there a sign that you need to change? Secondly, use a number line. That's what I suggest you guys do.
Yeah, that's the big idea or the concept involved here is how we do it is we first, whenever there are two symbols next to each other or two operation symbols, you first have to figure out the yellow bit. What does it mean when two negatives are next to each other? Then you need to think about what happens whenever you start with one number, find that on the number line, and then ask yourself, do I move left or do I move right afterwards? 5 is a bit easier because it starts at 2. So you can imagine the number 2 is there. So that's not hard to find. But if I'm going to take away 12, am I going to move to the right or am I going to move to the left? And so number lines go negative to the left. And so I'm going to have to go 1, 2 to get back to 0. But I've only taken away 2. I've got to take away 10 more, and so you'll get the answer here of -10. And in the first one, the answer would be 0. I see 2 raised hands there. Go ahead. If Ms. Anya, you can unmute them or they can.
Yeah. Canva, you can unmute yourself. I don't think Canva's audio is connected, to be honest, sir.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, then we've got, okay, Canva, if you can please, or Canva, I'll chat to him in the chat, but then Murdy, you can ask your question so long.
Yeah.
Sir, I wanted to answer.
Yes, which one?
I want to answer 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12.
Okay, you only get 1, so do number 8.
Okay, number 8 is -22.
You are on the money. Well done. Well done. Okay, I see the answers coming in. So 10, people have got, okay, be careful with 10, Afikile. I think if I'm at -1 on the number line, if I'm at -1 and I take away 6, I'm going to have to get quite a far way down. Okay, so have a look at that one. Keep an eye out.
So we've also got a hand from Kamogelo.
Kamogelo, go ahead.
Sir, I was asking, sir, if I can answer, sir.
Please go ahead. Which one would you like to do?
So I was gonna say 11 and 12, but sir, I can answer 12, sir.
Okay, give us 12. What's 12's answer?
So 12 is gonna be -4.
I agree with you because we add negative 10 on the number line and we go up by 6 units and we're going to get to negative 4.
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Okay. In this next one, same idea, a plus and a minus together ends up being a minus. And so that's going to be 9. And then -1 minus 6 is -7. And this last one, 9 minus -9 is going to be 9 plus 9, which is 18. Okay, guys, I want to get a feel for the group. If you generally are feeling comfortable with this, give us a thumbs up. If you still feel like you need more practice on this, give us a thumbs down. And you can be honest, we'll do the best we can to accommodate you. And even if we move on, Miss Anya will be in the chat to give you some extra tips and advice. And so don't be afraid while I move on to this next thing to ask some questions about that. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to move the lesson into a new stage now. We're going to talk about multiplying numbers. And one of the most important things about multiplying integers is knowing what happens when you have negatives next to each other. And so in this particular question, you'll notice that number 1 says -1. Well, first of all, what does it mean if you have a whole bunch of numbers written next to each other like this? So this means -1 times -1 times -1. Now, the good news is the main rule that we need to remember is that a negative number times a negative number, what normally happens when we have two negatives interacting, we get a positive. This is the main idea that we need to, so I see quite a couple of students have thumbs down there. Guys, don't be afraid to put the question that you struggled with in the chat, and Miss Anya will be there to help you as best she can in the chat whilst I go ahead with just this explanation on multiplication. Okay, so what does that mean for the first question? If I'm multiplying -1 by -1 by -1, how do I end up with this? Because that's a bit strange. So let me show you. What we have is -1 times -1 are two negatives. And so the overall result of this part is going to be a +1. Let me get, so this bit over here is a +1. But now you need to multiply that +1, you need to multiply it by a -1. And what happens when you have a positive and a negative interacting? The negative tends to, well, the negative wins out. So because this part is positive and this part is negative, you end up with a negative over here. And because it's 1 times 1 times 1, you get -1. Let me show you this in another way. What if we had -2 times -2 times -2? We haven't discussed what this even means. So what I want to suggest is we want to remember one rule. If a negative and a negative directly interact when you multiply, what does -2 times -2 give you? It turns out that that gives you +4. Now, if +4 is multiplied by -2, what we have now is we have a positive and a negative interacting. Now, it is a bit different because the symbols aren't right next to each other, but if something is next to it, it means it's being multiplied. We could have also written this as 4 times -2, and that means exactly the same thing. So the main rule here in this, I haven't finished this question, is 4 times -2 is going to be a minus, and then what's 4 times 2? It is 8. So you get -8. However, before I get to that, I want to just look at a couple of these, and then I'm going to give you some practice. So in the second one, what am I going to get for number 2? What do we get when we go 1 times -1 times -1? I want you to put that in the chat for me. Okay, so this part over here is a +1. Now, what is it when I go to negative times a negative? So this bit over here is going to stay a 1. I think this bit over here, a negative times a negative, is going to be a positive 1. And so 1 times 1 is just going to be positive 1. So number 2 is going to be a positive 1. What do you think I get for number 3? Let's just do all of these together, and then we can figure it out from there. What do we get for number 3? Put your answer, put a 3 there so I know which question you're talking about. So 1 times negative 1 times 1 times negative 1. See, Pasikle, y'all go ahead, ask a question. Oh, okay. Must I zoom in? Let me zoom in. Maybe I'm making this a little bit complicated. So what I'm really wanting you to see is, do you know what the answer to that question is? And do you know what the answer to that multiplication is? So I think 1 is a positive and negative 1 is a negative. A positive times a negative would be negative 1. This bit over here, 1 times minus 1 is minus 1. And now we're left with a negative times a negative, which gives you a positive 1. Okay, so I think I'm going to move on from this example. I'm actually going to rather give you one of some of my own, because I think there's a bit too many negatives and it might be causing confusion. So let me do it like this. I'm going to make my own questions. Let's do it like this. There are 3 questions. In the first one, I've got a negative number, negative 2, times a positive number over here. In the second question, I've got a negative times a negative. And in the last one, I've got a positive times a positive. I want you to give me the answers for each of these. What do you think the answers are? And I want you to put them in the chat. So what happens when you have a negative times a positive? Benjamin, I agree with you. So the answer for A is going to be minus 2, because when a negative and a positive interact, the negative is the one that wins out. Now what happens in B? Now we have 2 negative numbers that we're multiplying. So a double negative, or negative times a negative, is going to end up with a positive. And then because the numbers are 2 and 1, we just get plus 2. And then, oh, look, those answers are flooding in. You guys are doing spectacularly well. And then the last one is 2. Let me take this up a notch. Let me adapt my questions as I go. What if I have negative 3 times 2? And well done, guys. You've done really well there. And then I have for E, I have negative 3 times 4. And then for F, I have 3 times negative 2. Can you give me the answers for D, E, and F? You guys are on fire. Your fingers are lighting up the chat. I like it. We are going to master the integers. So for D, a lot of people are going with minus 6, and you're quite correct. When you have, the other thing I must point out is if there's nothing in front, it's automatically positive. So when I look at this, I say it's a negative number times a positive, because the positive is hiding in front. And so I end up with a negative, and 3 times 2 is negative 6. What do we get for E and F? I like it. So we get, for this, we get minus, because it's a negative times a positive, and it's minus 12. And then for this bit, positive, oh, now here I'm starting with a positive times a negative, but the order doesn't matter. When a positive and a negative are multiplied, the negative wins out and we get 6. Well done, Lesedi and Micah and Robetswe and lots of others. I can see you guys have got this. So I'm not going to hold you back. I'm going to say, I respect you. You've got this. And so I'm going to give you some questions, but I see a hand is up. So I'm going to ask you guys to do for me questions 1. Let's do it in 2 batches. The first batch, in fact, let's do these. Let me zoom in. Oh, why is my Zoom thing not working? Have I reached the limit of what I can zoom into? Okay, I want everyone to try and do up to number 6. And while you guys are doing that, I'm going to take questions from any of the students who need some clarification. So everybody who is feeling comfortable, I've done number 1 for you. You are going to do numbers over here, and then I'm going to take questions. So Shakira, I can see your hand up if you want to go ahead and ask a question.
So why must you minus? Why can't you plus?
Say that again. I lost you for a second.
Shakira, you need to unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Why must you plus? Why can't you? Why must you minus? Why can't you plus?
Aha. So part of the rules of mathematics are set up so that certain properties are preserved. So things like the distributive law and various things that are very helpful in mathematics. So if a negative times a positive wasn't negative, there's certain rules that wouldn't hold anymore. And so that's why we define it to be negative. I can't really give you a perfect answer other than to say, no, okay, I'm not going to go into that right now. I will talk to you maybe about that in a later lesson. But for now, essentially, if you have a positive multiplied by a negative, it's important that you know that the end result will be a negative. That's what I'm going to say for now. I will discuss, it basically preserves certain properties that we want, but I'm not going to go into detail on that now because I feel like, for example, you need to practice when you get -8 times 2, that's a negative times a positive. So you must know that that ends up as a negative. We need to just consolidate that knowledge and then we'll go from there.
So,
yes.
can I jump in here if you don't mind?
Please do, yeah.
Guys, an easy way to remember this is, and there's many ways you can explain it, but one that I've heard that kind of sticks is, so for instance, if you and your friend are both happy people, right, and you got stuff in common, then that's great. That's a good thing. That's a positive, right? If you're both upset people, right, it's not technically a good thing, but you're going to have something in common, right? Nice. But the moment when one person's super stoked and happy in life and the other person's not so much, there's going to be a bit of friction. It's not going to be lacquer. So like 2 happy people work together. 2 upset people work together. Not ideal, but it works together. But the moment when you have a happy person and an unhappy person, there's always going to be a bit of like friction and, you know, people are going to be unsure. So do let me know if that helps.
I like this idea of, yeah, of tying it to things like that. The double negative is something that is something that is held throughout logic and it's just a general principle. Like if you say not something, but you do need to almost find a way just to preserve this knowledge in your brain so you can use it as well. But I like that, Mzanya. Thank you for that. The other thing is, as you practice and get more feedback, so like we're doing lots of little examples, that's the way to really just cement the knowledge as we go. So for example, 2 negative people together, like Mzanya was saying there, that's going to give us a plus 16, whereas this is going to be a negative 16. I see Oyolo's hand is up. Is that still up from earlier or is that new?
Yes, it is up, sir.
Go for it. Yep. Ask a question.
So, during dividing and multiplication of integers, do you still use like BODMAS with it?
Ah, that's a good question. Okay. I'm deliberately waiting till the next lesson before I start mixing them together. So you'll
Okay.
notice at the moment, I'm keeping them separate because I don't want to mix too many new ideas in one lesson. But yes, the rules of BODMAS do still apply. And so when you have a positive, when you have, yeah, that's a really good question, but I'm not going to go into it today just because I want to make sure we get these ideas completely nailed down. But
Okay,
great
thank
question.
you, sir.
Great question.
So
Yeah.
I see we also have a hand up from Kamo.
Okay. So while we're doing that, guys, I'm just going to add these last 4 questions for those who are feeling comfortable and on fire. If you could give 7 to 10 a go, and then I'm going to keep taking questions. Who is Kamohelo? Go ahead.
Oh, sir, I was gonna answer 7, sir.
Ah, 7. Okay, let's give a moment. Let's give a moment more for these guys. I'll come to you now for some answers. I just want to give some time. Guys, I just want to say, like, huge shout out. I can see how many of you are participating in the chat. And I know that because you're being active and you're doing this and you're being part of the class, it's helping all of us. And so I just want to give you a shout out and say, wow, I'm super impressed that you're really buying into this. And you'll see that as you do lots of, today is really like one of those fitness training sessions, you know, where you have to do lots of little repetitions and you're stretching. But you'll see by the end of it, when we bring all these sessions together, you'll have a good knowledge of integers. So I just want to say well done to you, and keep those answers coming on the chat. I can see them. And it's really helpful for me as the teacher to get a sense of what pace the class is going at. Okay, Amartya has asked a good question. So how did you get the answer for number 5? I would love to explain. Okay, so first of all, ask yourself, is it a negative times a negative or a negative times a positive? First of all, get that situation sorted out in your head. So I think there's a negative here and a negative here. So what I need to make sure is I know that a negative times a negative is a positive. And this is a new idea today, okay? In maths, if we multiply 2 negative numbers together, we get a positive. New idea for the day. Give yourself time to absorb it. Once you've got that right, all you then do is say, okay, well, what is 6 times 3? It's going to be 18. Okay, so that was my thinking.
So
Yes.
another way, I think students who are struggling, I know you explained the steps now, but
Yes.
think of SN, like the letter S and the letter N. S for snake and N for Nelly, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So do your signs first. So like Sir said, is it right? We're multiplying a negative of a negative. So that
Yes.
tells me my answer is going to be a positive. So first sort out your sign.
Yeah.
Once you have that, then only do you actually look at the numbers. So
I think it's a very good idea.
I'm somewhere going to do number 7 with you guys, right?
Perfect.
So we have a positive number times a negative number. So tell me in the chat, will that answer be a negative or positive?
Yep, let's see. So positive times negative, what are we going to get? Tumelo has
Good.
answered. Tumelo says negative.
Good. And I agree. I agree. So we first get the symbol right, or sorry, the sign right. Apologies.
Yeah.
Then we do the numbers. So then we just ask ourselves, right, what's 12 times 4?
It's going to be 48. Perfect.
There we go. And that's how you do it. Easy as pie.
That is sounding fantastic. Now, guys, I'm just going to write up the answers. I'm going to keep an eye on the time. So a negative times negative 10 times positive 10, that ends up as a negative. I really like Ms. Anya's real focus on doing looking at the sign first and then looking at the number, then going, what's 10 times 10? It's 100. Now, Kamehlo, you wanted to answer earlier on. Can you come on the line and give us the answer for number 9, or at least your thinking? You don't have to get it right, but what were you thinking in number 9?
Sir, it's gonna be negative 27.
How did you get the negative sign? Because I was a bit sneaky with number 9. I gave you quite a long, how did you get to end up being a negative? Just tell us about that.
So first, what you're gonna do is you're gonna take the -3, sir, and you're gonna change it with another -3, sir. It's gonna give you positive, sir. But
Yes.
sir, there's one more negative, sir. So what you do is, sir, you take the positive, sir, you times it by negative, sir, and it's gonna give you negative. The answer's gonna give you negative.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Now, you've got the sign, which is negative. Now we need the number. And we just go 3 times 3, which is 9, times 3, which is 27. And then we are winning at life. Do we have to, Rebetswe, I think, do you want to answer the next one? Or at least give us the sign. What's the sign going to be for number 10? Jump on the line.
Gonna be a negative.
It's going to be a negative. Why is it going to be a negative?
Say because a positive times a negative is a negative times
Yes.
a negative is
No, you're right.
I think I made a mistake.
No, you didn't. So this
Yeah,
bit gives you a negative, and this bit is negative, which means that you end up with a positive. Yes.
Okay, I see.
No, but it's perfect. It's perfect. So there's different ways you could have done it, but the main thing is that you get there. Now at the end, should we ask Tumelo, what did you get? How did you get the number there?
So I
Yeah.
said 7 times -1 equals -7
Yeah.
times -7 equals -49.
Okay. Almost. You're very close. 7 times -1 will give you -7. But now you have -7 times -7. And so a negative times a negative actually ends up being a positive. Oh, wait, I've made something up here, guys. Let's have a look.
Oh.
No, I haven't. Wait, I'm getting confused. There's probably too much on the screen. This bit over here in yellow is -7. Then over here, this bit over here is the -7. When you have two negatives being multiplied, oh, sorry, you end up with a positive, and so it's positive 49. But this is getting tough now, guys. This is getting tough. So no problems. Okay, we have 3 minutes left, and what I want to do, division is actually quite simple. So I'll start the next lesson with that. I want to finish with these 4 quite challenging questions. And I'm going to scroll up a little bit so that we can all, I don't think I can zoom in. Miss Anya, can you see okay? Or is it a bit small?
Apologies, I was on mute. I was speaking to myself.
fine.
I can see quite fine as it for number 11 to number 14.
Yeah. So I want
Yeah, I
students to try, this is the challenge to finish the lesson. And you've done really well today. So let's just do our best. Let's everyone participate. And then while you're doing this, I will answer questions in the chat. So I won't be able to take audible questions, but Lunkumo, if you could go ahead and ask your question. And remember, Ms. Anya is also answering your chat questions as we go.
Sorry, sir. I was gonna ask for number 9.
Yeah.
That's a -3 times a -3 times a -3, which is negative. That is basically negative times negatives. So how do you get a -27?
Lovely. Okay, this is a very good question. The key thing is when you do -3 times -3, the two negatives cancel each other out to give you +9. Okay, but now you still have, so basically, when you go just this bit, that bit by itself gives you +9. But now you still have +9 times another -3. And in this situation, what you have is you have a positive times a negative. And what do we know about a positive times a negative? It ends up being a negative. And then 9 times 3 is just 27. So I think the story is, if there are an uneven number of negatives, it's going to end up being negative. So count them, 1, 2, 3. When it's uneven number of negatives, and you're multiplying, you end up with a negative. If it's an even number of negatives, you're going to end up with a positive. Now, this could be a very helpful hint for questions 11 to 14, because if you look at question 11, how many negatives does it have in here? I think it only has one.
Yes.
Now, question 12 has 2 negatives. And so I loved where your question came from, because it really kind of gave us a hint for these next questions, but I don't want to give it away. So I'm going to give you more chance to think about it, but thank you for that question. What else? And then let's have a quick look. Anya, if I could ask you also, as we end the lesson today, if you could just send out that poll just about the general thing that asks about, not right now, but maybe in a minute or two, about just the general feeling of the students. I think it's a 1 to 4 scale. It's always good for us to get feedback to kind of how the lesson is going. So just to get you ready there, Anya. And then I'm not taking any more audible questions for YP30, but I would love to answer your question in the chat. So if you would go ahead.
And then just to reassure while we're waiting for them to type, I have mentioned in the chat before, but guys, when Sir hops off to go to the grade 11 class, I will stay on to answer any questions or so. But like I said, do SN. In other words, first do your science. And when it's like these, whether it's like 3 or 4 things that you're timing together, do one step at a time. Okay, you can do this. Don't feel overwhelmed.
So I think that's, we're in the next lesson, we're going to carry on with this. So we're not just doing it today and moving on. And I've just gone up a little bit at the end because you guys were doing so well. There's actually 2 ways you can do this. The one is, you can do it piece by piece. So if you look at this question, you can say, look, there's a positive, a negative, and a positive. What is that going to give you as a final sign? It's going to give you a final sign of a negative. And then what is 4 times 5 times 3? It's 60. Or you could do it in 2 parts. You could say, what is 4 times minus 5? 4 times minus 5 is going to be minus 20, because a positive times a negative is a negative. And then ask yourself, what's a negative times a positive? Well, it's a negative, and what's 20? So there's 2 ways that you can do it. I would say you'll get a feeling by doing examples which method works for you. And so you'll get that feeling by just doing more examples. Okay, I think I'm going to just show you the last answers, and then Miss Anya will stay on the line. So -8 times negative is a positive, times another positive is a positive. And then 8 times 2 is 16. 16 times 5 is going to be 80. And you know what, guys? Maybe I should actually come back to this in the next lesson. In the next lesson, I know some of you are feeling a bit overwhelmed with this. And so rather, I want to say, you know what? You've done so well today. Give yourself a pat on the back. If you can do these last 2, fine. But I'm rather going to come back to the beginning of a new lesson when we're feeling fresh. And I actually want you to just feel good about yourselves for today. I have taken it up maybe a little bit steeply really quickly at the end. Ms. Anya, could you just put the poll out for today so that students can just give us a sense of how it felt for them? I enjoyed the lesson. It was really fun being with you. And so now, Ms. Anya, she will stay on the line for a couple of minutes now just to answer any additional questions. But I actually want to say, I think it's time we give ourselves a break. We'll stop at sort of 11 and 12 for today, and we will pick it up in the next lesson. Okay. And then Anya, if you could just take a screenshot of the feedback so we can use it as we plan going forward. And yeah, I just want to say thanks, guys. It was really nice being with you tonight, and I hope that you have a good week, and I will see you on Wednesday. Okay.